America has done it again. Its fight against Russia is set to hurt the world yet again, especially developing economies like India. Look at oil prices. They're on the rise. This week, they hit a 4-month high because the US is targeting Russian crude once again. It is trying to hurt Russia's oil industry and shrink the supply of their oil. These moves have triggered a rally in the oil market. You probably know what this means. If the prices keep rising, it will hurt your wallet, especially if you're here in India. India is very sensitive to fluctuations in oil prices. It imports close to 90% of its crude needs. So a rise in international prices immediately affects India. Look at these charts. Brent crude is the global benchmark for oil prices. This week, it exceeded $82 per barrel. One barrel has 159 liters of oil. So at the current rate, 159 liters of oil, or 1 barrel, costs $82. Brent crude was trading at the same levels in August last year. So this is a 4-month high. Like I said, and experts say it is going to go higher, up to $85 per barrel, maybe even $90. This is according to an assessment by Goldman Sachs. And what is driving this rally? American sanctions. Last week, the US sanctioned 183 tankers. They were part of what's called a shadow fleet. This fleet of tankers does not have any direct link to Russia. But this was a fleet that was supplying Russian oil. So the US sanctioned them. And guess where this oil was going? To countries like India and China. They depend on these tankers for oil supplies. Now the tankers have been sanctioned, so they won't be able to transport Russian oil. Of course, Moscow will be hit, but so will be the countries that were getting this crude supply. Now listen to how the US has defended the sanctions.
That the oil market is very well supplied, that oil prices will stabilize in a place that does not impose undue burdens on American consumers.
There won't be any burden on American consumers. That's what he said, and that's all that Washington really cares about. What about the rest of the world? What about oil buyers across the world? They will feel the impact. In India, oil refiners are taking urgent steps. They're speeding up payments and securing supplies of Russian crude. Deliveries are being rushed. At least 6 tankers of Russian crude are heading to India as we speak. Indian banks too are taking extra precautions. These are banks that process payments to the oil tankers. They have stepped up their paperwork. They're no longer processing payments in US dollars. Instead, they're settling dues in rubles, the Russian currency. Now, this trend makes one thing clear. India's refiners want to lock in supplies, that too at the right price, before the US sanctions take effect. And this urgency is understandable. American sanctions will hit the oil market. They will limit access to Russian oil supply, so the overall availability of oil could take a hit. And that's the second reason why prices are rising, because the supply is shrinking. The US sanctions are making a bad situation worse. They may end up creating an artificial shortage of oil. In fact, India is already feeling it. It is getting less Russian crude. By February, supplies could drop below 800,000 barrels. For context, India imported over 1 million barrels of Russian oil in December. Next month, it could fall below 800,000 barrels, and this is concerning also because Russia is among our top suppliers. In the month of November, Russia was the biggest supplier of crude to India. Now, with those volumes shrinking, India will have to look for alternatives, for other countries to source oil from, like countries in West Asia, countries like Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Reports say India has already started negotiating prices with them, so there could be a shift in the coming months, a shift that frankly cannot be avoided, because India cannot afford supply disruptions and sudden price hikes. Inflation has just started to come under control. It is hovering above 5%, which is still on the higher side, but compared to the recent past, it is a 4-month low. India's Reserve Bank wants inflation to settle below 4%. That is the target, below 4%. We are still above 5%, trying to come down to 4%. Higher oil prices will undo this progress. It will turbocharge inflation. New Delhi is working hard to avoid that, but it's going to be tough because the West has a wrecking ball. It keeps hurting the global economy to push its geopolitical agenda.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines. Detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on First Post.